Hello, the name is Lilith, and I am a goth mommy, or baddie, you could say. I'm also the best damn necromancer that you have and ever will see. Don't believe me, huh? I wish I could say I was surprised. Luckily for you, I'm on my way to the nearest city to go about raising some dead corpses to fight in my army. Let's see. Yes, the graveyard. Perfect. Now all I have to do is reanimate the dead corpses of all the fine citizens within the city's friends and families and other types of loved ones and yada yada. Voila! Hello, handsome. The perfect specimen and soldier to fight in the army. Our first little trip gallivanting through the graveyard ended up getting us 33 skeleton soldiers, but I'm afraid that I require much more. Time to grab a shovel and start digging up some more, I suppose. Yes, 129 skeleton soldiers. Now that is much better. For a start, I'll say. Perhaps one of the best parts about having the living dead as our army is the fact that we don't have to pay them any wages, and we don't have to feed them either. We, however, do still need money to buy armor and weapons for ourselves, so let's start hunting down some bandits and other disgusting creatures. Oh yes, no doubt your horned head shall fetch a pretty price, my friend, as well as your equipment. What's that? You're going to trample me beneath your hooves? Oh, you poor, dumb, ugly creature. I can't wait to see you try. Truly, I begin to wonder as I sit atop this small little bank and look over our fine skeleton soldiers and their mass of many, and I wonder if they're regretting their decision just yet. I'm sure they probably are. If their brains can process complex thoughts, that is, and that's a pretty big if, I'll say. As you can see, they are far outnumbered, but it would seem that these disgusting hoofed creatures have tried to join forces with the outlaws to fight back. Poor bastards. Very well, shall we begin?
On them now!
As we began making our way up the hill towards the tree line, our skeleton army was already engaging with these barbaric brutes. As great as it was seeing our skeletons thrashing and beating the shit out of them, you know that Mommy had to get her pound of flesh as well. And with that, the sounds of clattering bones filled the airwaves, as this was our very first victory, with many more to come. Now that that's over though, we can enslave and/or resurrect many of these warriors, and those who did not die we can take prisoner. The corpses of these seasoned warriors are much more effective on the battlefield than the common folk that we've been stealing from graveyards. Not only could we ransom prisoners, but we could also take all of their gear to the nearest town to be sold, and also so that we could ransom these dirty bandits. All this together should bring us in a pretty chunk of change. Of course, though, we would scavenge through much of the gear and equipment to equip to ourselves. Every goth baddie needs a little bit of leather after all, am I right? Time for us to collect more peasants and villagers for our army though. Off we go once more on the road to battle and plunder more brooding bandits and creatures. Thankfully, with numbers like ours, the odds were always in our favor. Smell that crisp spring air with is that a hint of, yes, I believe it is, rotting flesh and bone meal. And it would appear that our enemies detect it as well, pissing themselves, no doubt. As they should be, marching our undead minions across this foggy landscape straight into their jugulars. Some of them were much more brave than others, but I'm afraid that it wouldn't get them very far. And again, of course, I had to quench my own thirst for this bandit blood, to which I would do, although they were teaming up on me and I may have bitten off more than I could chew and more than my armor could handle. Nevertheless, once again on this day, the undead have prevailed. From the salvaged equipment, I also got myself a much nicer outfit that not only will protect me much better, but is much more complementary to my figure, I feel. And I also ended up buying myself this sweet-ass wizard cloak. cut type of pauldrons thing. It looks nice, right? But even though we completely smoked those bandits and deserters during that battle, we're running a little bit low on soldiers ourselves. Back to the old graveyard. You know, I've been wondering if maybe word has spread about us digging up and reanimating all these corpses like... yeah. Looks like it has. Looks like we're gonna have to fight our way out of this one. Here's hoping that this goes well. They currently outnumber us by quite a bit. However, we do have the added advantage of fighting in a graveyard. It would seem that they've caught me in my element, if you know what I mean.
With me!
Though I will say that my personal guard of skeletons were less than adequate. We weren't exactly expecting company, and I would quickly be overwhelmed by the night watchmen. Thankfully, while they were chanting and cheering about their victory, some of my remaining undead would quickly pull me away from the graveyard. With my tail tucked between my leg and still healing from a knot on my head, I decided to leave the city and begin making my way towards others to raise an undead army, somewhere where my antics would be less known of. And with that, I had raised quite the little warband, just under 190 soldiers. Time for me to continue my escapades of raiding these bandits and beastmen, disgusting looking creatures I might add.
Give 'em hell!
We would show these beasts no mercy, neither I nor my legions upon legions of bonemen. Flesh would be severed, on their part, not ours of course, but they would end up cracking many a rib and femur of our soldier. This was our largest battle yet, and of course we were doing A-OK, but this was also the first time that we had seen these massive behemoth beasts as well, especially in action like this. We could use them in our army at some point, but for now we'll stick with the undead, I suppose. After killing all their infantry forces, we then began running down all of their archers just on the hill before finishing them off. Ah, it feels so good to be a winner. With the money that we ended up making from that battle, we could end up purchasing ourselves a pretty little pony with some appropriate armor to protect it, of course. Long gone are the days of us leading our troops into battle on foot. We also ended up buying ourselves a gorgeous robe to wear into battle, and it's quite fitting with our pauldrons, though I'm not really sure if blue is my style. Traveling between cities and villages now was much easier on horseback. Oh, and I also made up my mind. Blue is not my color. I much more prefer orange, and sure, I wasted quite a bit of money on those blue robes, but I like this better. We would travel near and far, from village to village, town to town, city to city, raising our undead soldiers from their grave. We had to be quite careful and move around quite a bit, as most of these fine folk didn't like us raising up all their family members to fight in my army. But they sure didn't seem to mind us taking out all the bandits, outlaws, and Empire deserters in their local areas. We may not be the heroes that these people wanted, but we are indeed the heroes that they get. Something of an anti-hero, I guess. Nevertheless, we would continue growing and growing and growing our army until we had an army of 220 undead strong. With an army of this size, we are quite the contender. But having a great big army of skeletons was not all that we wanted. We wanted to go ahead and upgrade them as best we could, making them into much more experienced and much more effective soldiers, including but not limited to skeleton swordsmen, spearmen, damned warriors, and also some black knights as well, who are our first mounted units with some pretty badass skeleton horses as well. With an army of this size, taking on a force about the same size as the one that we previously took on should be much easier. Now this is more like it. Finally, we will get a real taste of true battle. We had caught these beastmen in this beautiful area just as they were about to enter this village and begin sacking it for resources and plunder. Though this battle is indeed for our own personal gain, then perhaps our victory here will help people open their minds to necromancers and maybe even offer up some corpses for free without any hassle, who knows.
Cut them down!
Doubtful, but a girl can dream, I suppose. We began riding into battle, leading our troops, and though we do severely outnumber these bandits, I still decided to take our horsemen up onto the hill where we could try to flank them, to minimize casualties, of course. Arrows whizzing by my head, I and my knights would begin attacking the archers' lines. There was hardly anything we could do here other than get arrows fired at us for being a distraction, but that's exactly what we wanted. If we could throw them off of their footing, we could also keep them from hitting our infantry. Not that they really needed our help though, they seemed to be doing just fine on their own, as you can see. With the aroma of a metallic liquid in the air, another victory under our belt. We had made so much money from all of their gear, I decided to purchase myself a nice little hat. Ironically, this is a witch hunter's hat. But you see, it's ironic because, well, I think you understand. We also ended up purchasing ourselves a cracked bright wizard staff, and I'm gonna level with you here, I have no idea what this does, but I look forward to finding out. It was the perfect weapon to test out on the night watchmen of these cities when they tried to stop me from raising my army further and further. Though it may be a little bit hard to tell, but this staff actually deals fire damage with every landed blow, which is pretty cool. Nevertheless though, we would continue our epic journey across the continent. At one point I seen the siege of a city, and I realized just how small our armies really were, when this army had up to 12,000 soldiers among their ranks. We are but a mere fraction of the power of many of these nations. Looks like we have a lot more growing to do, and many more graveyards to scavenge through. Eventually, we would be at the forefront of an army up to 301 undead strong. And with these capabilities, we could take on basically any size army that the beastmen as well as the deserters and bandits could muster. However, even throughout all this time, I have neglected to tell you that we do actually have the ability to use our magic in battle. I've simply been saving it as I didn't want to make things too easy. It does cost a good bit of our magical points, I forget what they're called of course, and so we can't use it during every single battle, but as you can see, we can overwhelm our enemies with even more hordes of the undead by bringing them from the earth itself. An ability that would be very handy in a pinch, no doubt. By bringing in all these beastmen and bandits and so on and so forth, we've began to amass something of a small fortune for ourselves, so we needed to start upgrading our gear once more. This time around, some nice plate boots and gauntlets. Oh, would you just look at that shine gleaming in the faint moonlight? They look even better when our dark, powerful magic is reflecting off of them as well. And perhaps the best part is that they will protect us much better than the leather gear that we were previously using. For a time, we would continue chasing down the beastmen and other undesirables in the area. Not because we hate them, I realize that this is the majority of who we're fighting, but realistically it's because they're easy targets, and it's also quite easy for us to make a good bit of money off of them. Money that we would then use to buy brand new weapons like a Scythe of More. Unlike our wizard staff, I don't expect it to start dealing fire damage to our enemies, but I think it'll be perfect for helping us reap the souls of the living. And, I mean, come on, Necromancer, a giant scythe, it's a fitting weapon, is it not? Especially given our occupation. But even with as far as we've come so far, there is so much more to experience, so many more glorious battles to be held, so many people to meet and companions to join us, undead to join us as well, so many more spells to learn. There's a lot to do. And though, yes, I'm not exactly sure where we're going to go and where this road is going to lead for us. Maybe we conquer nations and own one of our own with an undead army under our thumb. Perhaps we gather up Empire deserters as well and let them help us take over the Empire of Man. There is so much to do and just so much to experience, as mentioned, and I can't wait to do it with all of you. Until next time.